Moving along down our list of layer style effects, the next one we're going to have a look at is inner shadow. Now this has several settings that reflect perfectly what was already seen in drop shadow, but I will be running over them a second time if you didn't watch that video. I'm going to assume that maybe you're jumping around. So if you find yourself wanting to skip this, that's totally cool. The idea of inner shadow is to produce a shadow effect within the solid pixels of your layer. And as you can see here, the result is something that looks kind of punched out. Now, I am changing the position of the shadow just by dragging within the document itself. As long as your inner shadow settings are selected in your layer style window, you can do that, which is, of course, a very nice trick. Now, at the very top, we have our blend mode and our color. Of course, we can use this to change the color of the shadow itself. So if I set this to something like blue, and click OK, we're not going to see much of a change with a color of red as our base and then a blend mode of multiply. But what I can do is change our blend mode over to color, and you can see that we are indeed shifting over to whatever color we happen to choose. So if I switch this to green, you can see the result in yellow and so forth. So pretty straightforward, but for our purposes of example, I will leave the blend mode set to multiply and the color set to black. Next we have opacity, which by default is at 75%, allowing you to see a little bit of what's going on underneath the shadow. You can make this very faint or extremely intense all the way to full black. Next we have the angle of the shadow. Currently this is slaved to the global light, so if you make any changes to the global light settings by going under your layer menu and jumping down to layer style global light, those will be reflected here. Alternatively, if you make any changes in here, they will affect the global light and any other layer styles that pay attention to the global light, so be aware of that. If you don't want to use or affect the global light source, be sure to switch that checkbox off before you make any significant changes. Now, the angle combined with the distance control the positioning of your shadow, which I was adjusting earlier just by dragging inside the document. And you can see that is updating the angle and the distance of the shadow in real time. And if you want to make manual adjustments to those sliders and to the angle, of course, you can do that. Next, we have some controls that adjust the shape of the shadow itself, being the choke and the size. Size is going to create kind of a blurring effect, and what that's doing is giving you a greater band of transition between full opacity and complete transparency. So you can see that kicking up. Now, if you push that too far, choke, on the other hand, is going to take the fully opaque area of the shadow and spread it out just a little bit further. So if you end up kicking the size up far too much and you need to get a little bit more definition back in your shadow, you can bring some choke back in to do that. But in this case, because we have such a tight area, we do have to be very, very subtle with how we use that setting. Now, down from here we have contour, and this is going to control the mapping of transition from completely transparent to completely opaque. By default, this is a linear relationship, and that's defining the relationship of change within that band of transition from completely transparent to completely opaque. Of course, you can use any of the settings as discussed in the earlier video over the contour window. So if I do kind of an up and down thing, we get funny banding inside the shadow, which you can use for all kinds of cool little effects. However, I will cancel that out. Next, we can apply noise with our slider. So if you need a little bit of graininess added to the shadow to help it more appropriately blend in with a background, you can do that here. You can take any of the settings that you have made up to this point and make them the default settings for this particular layer style effect by clicking the Make Default button, or you can click on Reset to Defaults, and that'll put everything back to where it was. So that's it. That's just a rundown of all of the settings for the inner shadow effect. Once again, that is just a way to have a shadow which takes place within the solid pixels of a layer, resulting in this kind of punched out effect that you see here. That will wrap things up for this video. Thanks a lot.